This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Theodora Izzard. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing today?
Really good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see that thing banner scrolling below. If you use that coupon code of Ghost, you can check that out. It's an audio only platform that we're featured on. We'll be on there later today. You can get 1 month free just to check that out if you use that coupon code. And then want to let people also know that we're at episode 1025, tracking that on Apple Podcasts since 2016. And today we also have your link for those of you that want to see that. It's or don't see it but want to know what it is www.seerhealerguide.co.uk/. And if people click on that, what do they find there?
Well, there's lots of information about me, but there's also about the services that I provide. And there's 3 different levels to that. I'm an energy healer, and within that, a spiritual seer, healer, and a guide, hence why that's what my website's called. But they can access, information about one-to-one sessions and the community space that I hold and support, and also one-to-one mentoring is available as well through that community. So there's lots of information about.
That's awesome. So maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself and kind of give your like a brief background, and then we can start talking about how you experience God, because that's the topic for this episode is how do you experience God. But you might want to kind of give your story.
Yeah. So I wasn't spiritual or religious or anything for the majority of my life until about 8 years ago, when I was really at a kind of breaking point in my life, and I had complex PTSD. My father had just died, and really I just couldn't cope. And the spiritual world came knocking and kind of found me, and it's been through finding energy healing and connection to the spiritual world that I have found the greatest amount of healing. And really, I think, it's really saved me. But it wasn't just, from quite often there isn't necessarily in the spiritual world like the association with God.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only a couple of years ago that even though I was running a multi-award winning Reiki business, and I was, having great success with the energy healing, but the visions that I started to have a couple of years ago changed. And then I realized that this kind of God energy was coming through to me a lot more clearly and with a lot more power. And over time I started to realize that the energy healing that I was doing with the Angelic Reiki was just, I knew I was capable of more, and I knew that I was meant to be doing something else. And I'd got to this point where I was like, well, what is it? What do I need to do? And I actually prayed one night. I said, just show me what I need to do next. And the next morning I got an email about this Godcoding course and becoming a practitioner. And I was like, okay, there it is. There's the answer. And that's been that. And it really, it feels like the most aligned modality, and it brings together everything that I've learned about healing and being able to cultivate that connection with the divine within yourself, to be able to create, really lasting and powerful change in your life. So
yeah, it's like a holistic thing. I'm a creative person, and I'm a Buddhist. I was originally Christian, but I found that like I was always connected to like the idea of the muse, which I was into. Like as a kid, I was into Victorian poetry. I was into like Wordsworth and Tennyson, Blake, and I was always really interested in, like, they're always talking about the looking glass, which means they would look into the mirror and then look at themselves.
Yeah.
And then they also talked about the muse, which was this kind of universal, thing that you could tap into if you're a creative.
Mm-hmm.
And if you trust yourself, things will come in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like this idea, like, well, if you can be connected and then you can be vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
then you can kind of open up and you have this like flow state where you can be creative and connect things and have this holistic picture instead of being like on one leg of
Yeah.
something. And I think that's what it seems like people figure that out at some point, that
Yeah.
there's this like this universal thing that you can connect to. And I think as creators, we kind of channel it. But maybe you can talk about a little bit about how you beat addiction and became spiritual. Maybe tell you more of that story.
Yeah, I think it's, what you were just saying about vulnerability is really beautiful, and that has definitely been, kind of my experience. So much of my addiction was, I had complex PTSD. So, I'd had a traumatic childhood and trauma, and also, experienced a lot of trauma through adult life as well. And the addiction was just not being able to cope. It
Mhm.
was a suppression of all of those feelings and all of those memories and everything that just was running my life, even though I had no idea about that. And really the beating the addiction side of things, it didn't really, it was more about, as I learned how to cope, as I learned how to feel,
Mhm.
because I was so completely shut down from, I genuinely had to teach myself how to feel. Like, when I look back at myself now, I feel like I was just this walking corpse, because I had, and so much of that has been linked to being able to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
when you've, and that's, and so it links really beautifully with what you were saying about then being able to be open to receive, and and it takes a lot of courage to
Yeah. It's
have
hard.
to
It's
to
hard because the world, kind of teaches you to like, oh, you got to buck up. You
Mhm,
gotta like, suck it up. Like in the U.S., we're like, oh, it's like you don't go that way. Like a lot of guys are like, oh,
mhm.
you gotta be strong. You can't get into feelings. You
Yeah.
gotta like not feel it. But if you're a creative, you're not like the guys there on the football team.
Mhm,
Yeah, you're more sensitive, right?
mhm,
You're more empathetic. Where other guys say, well, that's silly. I don't care about that. That's foo foo. They
mhm,
won't consider anything that might make them look like they're weak.
mm,
And if you're an artist, you kind of live in being able to channel all kinds of emotions into art.
mhm,
And so you have to accept those things. And
mm,
then you have to present those things. And when you present those things, well, people could criticize it. And
mm.
they criticize it, then you get hurt and you take it personal, but you have to, have the courage to present yourself and
Yeah.
not be worried about the outcome. Kind of like you build up a way to deal with the negative feedback
Mhm.
where you listen to it, and if it makes sense, okay, I can take that. If it's not constructive, then I don't really need to focus on that. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to like. You can say it; it's harder to do it.
Yeah, completely. And I think, it's a really beautiful point that you make about that, you know having to feel to be able to create and express yourself. And actually, I found the more that I've learned how to feel, the stronger I have felt in myself. And so it's, actually, this whole like, oh, I don't feel anything, so I'm strong. It's actually just the total opposite,
Yeah, you're
is,
weaker. Yeah,
yeah, the more that, because that's the thing, if you're not feeling anything, and if you're not allowing yourself to experience life, the good and the bad, then you're actually so much more susceptible to breaking.
yeah,
And and that's the thing, like, because you just don't have that resilience from feeling and from being able to go, okay, oh, that didn't work out how I wanted, and I actually was able to pick myself up out of it. Or, oh my god, that was the most incredible experience I've ever had. Because that's the thing, when we shut ourselves down from feeling, we not only shut ourselves down from feeling bad stuff, but we also can't feel any of the good stuff.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
a it's a two-way street. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just, now, and having, I think a lot of that is when you're doing trauma healing, and even with the spiritual side of things, like, you can feel these massive energies, or all this love or joy or peace or whatever it is that you're experiencing. But if your nervous system doesn't know how to cope with that, it can feel totally overwhelming. It can make you feel like you're going to shut down again. And I think so much of, I think for me, as much as a lot of my spiritual ascension and growth has been very rapid, it's also been gentle enough to be able to cope and learn how to hold all of the good stuff that was coming in, whilst I was learning to let go of all the bad stuff that had happened in the past.
Yeah, it's so hard today because everybody's so immediate and everybody wants like the quick fix. And they want the 12 step, and they don't realize like whatever you do, you're probably gonna have to do those things for the rest of your life. There's no like real quick fix, right? If you're
Yeah.
gonna have to find a way to do something that's like incrementally sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Where I meet a lot of people, they want to get the quick fixes. Like everything, like with art, is like like there's no overnight success story. Like it's a lot of work.
Mm.
If you've done that work, there's so much, but people might see one piece and they think that somebody just jumped into the ring. And it's like, that's not the way it is. It's like, it's over time, you've kind of built up the courage to present your work. You've worked on it and you built it up. You've become confident in yourself, and you're like
Mm-hmm.
lessening any kind of imposter syndrome where you can
Yeah.
get on to any stage in, whatever type of art you're into, and present
Mm.
it and not get affected by any kind of feedback other than that you're going to continue. And that's
Mm-hmm.
a hard thing for some people to get into because it's like they don't really trust themselves. Like that, even with the artists I deal with as a producer, I run into people that still don't trust themselves.
Mm.
They still are kind of comparing to other people, and it's like, well, you're already here, but you're still comparing yourselves to this person. And
Yeah.
so if you find that kind of like this universal kind of connection, right? Or like
Mm-hmm.
universal key, where you're like
Yeah.
you've discovered there's no bad note. You can
Yeah.
learn from every experience, and you can take whatever that perceived bad note and actually turn it into something new. And
Yeah.
a lot of people just like they're into like a perfection. It's like there's no perfection. It's like there's learning how to deal with the moment in kind
Mm.
of in that flow state, and knowing how to recover. Like a jazz musician, you might not even perceive we hit the wrong note if
Mm-hmm.
we don't make you feel we hit the wrong note. And we
Yeah.
might not have hit that planned note, but we know how to recover. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really like the core of like life is like knowing how to recover from those perceived or unperceived like bad notes, but they're really not bad notes.
Yeah. 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 Oh, so many beautiful points. Definitely. I mean, yeah, I remember when I first started healing, and I went to my therapist and was like, yeah, okay, I've got all these walls around my heart and I need to do all this stuff. And I was like, right, I just wanted to take like a sledgehammer to the wall and, get everything down. She was like, no, 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 no. We've got to do this brick by brick, and I think if you really want to, that's the thing when the thing with overnight success is if it's, it can be taken away so quickly because it doesn't have a solid foundation underneath it, like you said, with that confidence, and that is something that has to be built up over time, and that trust. And I think it's that relationship that you have with yourself then goes forward into so many of your other relationships. You think like, I don't know, if you were going to start dating someone and like you'd end up with them super fast when actually you don't know that person. It's the same. Like if you're just looking to create change overnight, like you've got to have that solid foundation within yourself and know who you are and how you show up in the world to be able to then really go forward and totally create what's authentically you.
Mm-hmm.
I was having this conversation about social media, actually, and because I think a lot of people, and I guess it's the same with art or music or whatever it is that you're trying to create, if you're creating something because you're trying to make it so that the other person will like it, then it's never going to be as good as if you're just creating something that you totally love and all of your energy and your vibe is in it. Then naturally the people that actually totally resonate with who you are and what you love is and are on that same kind of frequency as you are going to love it naturally, rather than, and it's going to be instantly better.
Yeah. It's that
Than,
law of attraction. It's like that's what I try to tell people. It's like if you get a young artist and I'm a producer, they come to me and they're trying to compete with what's in the top 20, be like Taylor Swift, be like Beyonce, be like whatever.
yeah.
And I'm like, I want to hear your authentic self, the song that you're scared to show me because it really doesn't match all that stuff you're trying to match. Because to me, that's who you really are. And I've always been the type of person that I'm looking for like emerging independent people voices, things I haven't really heard. Or, everybody kind of is the sum of the things they've experienced, but it's how they express it is uniquely different.
Yeah.
And that's your edge. Your edge is the fact that it's not the same. And that people always want to fit in. And that's a hard thing to get into because like everybody thinks they have to match what it already existed. And the industry in art always wants they want to remake movies, remake TV shows, remake whatever was number one. That's always what they want to do. But then once in a while, you get a Hendrix, you get a Jim Morrison, you get a Janis Joplin, you get a Freddie Mercury, you get somebody, a David Bowie, you get somebody that pushes it, and it's like they're not really like anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's they seem to forget. Like, don't you remember these people? They didn't fit in the box. And it's like then they want everybody else is, well, it's all about fitting in the box. Well, how did they get through? It's definitely not exactly that, but that's what they want to make it into a formula that's repeatable. And you just have to have the confidence to just present yourself. And that is a hard thing because like if you're not confident, if you got imposter syndrome, if you don't believe that if people told you you're not good enough and you believe that's the truth, where are you going to be? You're going to be stuck in that box.
Yeah, completely. And that's definitely been, my experience. And before I was doing any of the spiritual stuff, I just had a usual kind of sales job. I worked, and it was so not what I was supposed to be doing. Now and now I'm doing all of this energy healing, which just feels so completely aligned with who I am and my soul's work, and but it is difficult to get into that space of just I think for me it's faith that actually you can go down a path that you haven't been down before and maybe other people haven't been down before, and know that that path is still going to keep emerging in front of you, but that actually maybe you're meant to be a leader or you're meant to be doing this for the first time to show other people how it can be done. That was really something that I have felt over the years. I used to share a lot on social media about my kind of healing journey and what I was going through and the stages of things, because when I was in the depths of my depression and addiction and things like that, I couldn't see anybody that had got better. And I couldn't see anybody that, was living a happy, normal life or, and had really made that positive change and got out of that sadness. And so I kind of really I always kind of wanted to be a sort of a poster girl for like positive change is possible, but you've got to get used to, we actually, when we're in addiction or when we're in disconnection of some sort and we're not living to our highest potential, it's comfortable, but it's still uncomfortable. That discomfort, because that you're not where you're meant to be. And even though it's, you're living for, what other people feel society says you have to be doing, or whatever it is that's keeping you stuck in that place, it's equally as uncomfortable to kind of go, well, actually, I am just going to live from my heart and go down this road where I don't know where I'm going, but I know it's going to take me to the place I'm meant to be. But it's a different kind of discomfort, but it's just so much more fulfilling. And what I've learned is that actually it's in that discomfort that, rather than pushing it away, there's so many more opportunities for growth and creativity and expansion, which is what I now realize is what life's about, rather than keeping yourself small and stuck. And I'd rather be a little bit on that, like you said, on that edge. You're like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's like that bleeding. It's hard because society has like this kind of societal dysfunction, and you're
mhm,
kind of codependent to societal dysfunction. So
mhm,
you stay within that box at work, the 9 to 5, and it's like a codependency. It's like being with a bad partner. It's like you don't really feel good about it, but it feels safe. But it's like it's actually hurting you, right? It's not letting you grow. You're getting stuck. And
yeah,
society, dysfunction wants to keep you in the box because it makes you part of the cog, and
mhm,
you're not pushing anybody's buttons, and you're kind of just being part of that machine. But if you push things, it's going to be there's going to be discomfort. If you try to go outside your genre, like as if you're a bebop musician, and suddenly you create fusion,
mm,
and then all the classic people in the actual, you know, there ends up being this idea that that is the standard, and as
yeah,
soon as you push something else, then like, well, that's not the standard.
mm,
So it's the canon. Like if you're into all these canons of like what is art, and as soon
mhm,
as you push or blur the lines, then you're like, well, that's not going to go in the gallery. You're not going to get presented because you're doing something outside the structure.
mm,
And so that is the hard thing to do, but it's really, the life is part of that. It's that
mm,
discomfort that you have to relearn all the
yeah,
time. And that's a hard place to be because the people want that, they want a known thing so they can feel safe.
mhm,
I think that everybody wants to feel safe, and then sometimes feeling safe doesn't really isn't the right isn't the right choice in certain
yeah,
situations.
100%. And I think, also it's about whether the difference is how comfortable do you feel, but also, are you doing things just to keep other people feeling comfortable?
Mm,
Sometimes when we change, and when, growth is such a natural part of life, like nature is constantly evolving, and it's totally normal to go through life and change and evolve. And, you can come out a completely different person over 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And that's why, you evolve out of jobs or relationships or whatever it is. And you can still take all that growth from that period. But then I think sometimes people can get stuck because they feel so different and they want to move into this next chapter or take that leap. But because of the people around them, actually they feel that they can't because it's so disruptive
yeah, you
to
want to
other
please
other
people.
yeah,
Yeah,
other
you're in
people's
that people
perfectionism.
pleaser thing where you're pleasing everybody else, but you're just thinking that it's your responsibility to make them comfortable
Hmm.
instead of if I can't stay at the 20-year-old version of myself, and some of my friends might want me to be that way because that's what
Yeah,
they know.
yeah,
But the 56-year-old version of me is not the 20-year-old version of me. And you might have wanted me to stay in that place because that was comfortable for you, but it's like not
mhm,
comfortable for me.
yeah, exactly.
you know,
But actually, the greatest gift I think that we can show, that we can give people around us, is to show them our truest selves, and to show them that actually I am going to change, and I feel safe enough that I can change and evolve and show you this new person, this new version of me, and trust that I will be loved for that.
hmm
And that can be really difficult if you do make that move and you do show that authenticity in yourself and, you know, how you really feel. And it can be really upsetting, obviously, if people don't want to come with you and do reject that newness in you. But it doesn't mean that the other people that are in your future or that are ready and so waiting and wanting to connect with that true version of you, you know, we have to be able to kind of take that step forward and trust that who's going to come with us is going to come, and the people that, you know, are meant to love us are going to meet us where we want to be and will evolve with us, you know.
Yeah, that I think like, a lot of times it's so hard to find the balance. Like you know, because sometimes life is about figuring out the right balance for your own like inner self and then the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And what I've found is like, you know, I'm part Native American, Blackfoot and Cherokee, and I've
Mm-hmm.
always kind of been into this idea of Gaia, you know, and the
Mm-hmm.
concept of like Mother Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and really connecting to a spiritualism that's kind of like through spirit animals, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, the wind and you know
Yeah.
and the elements, and I always found that creativity is kind of centered on this like idea of a feminine kind of God, that
Mm-hmm.
because it's creative, like the idea of birth. Like if you're an artist,
Mm-hmm.
like you give birth to your piece of work,
Mm-hmm.
it's feminine. Like so, a lot of times if you're an artist and you're a guy, you know, a male artist, you realize that you're connecting to like the female part of yourself
Mm-hmm.
when you're creating work. And if you're truly honest with the process, you start to understand that there is this kind of female energy and that's
Mm-hmm.
that kind of divine mother. And some people are like, oh, well, you know, they don't feel comfortable with that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think like if you start to connect, you start to see, at least in my experience, I've embraced it in this idea of
Mm-hmm.
expansive likeness, like crossing into things and being very into giving birth to ideas
Mm-hmm.
and changes.
Yeah.
I want to maybe have you talk about like the idea of like divine, you know, feminine or divine mother, or you know, from that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, the divine feminine path, I kind of was only introduced to through the divine counterpart or twin flame journey, which I started on at the beginning of my kind of awakening. And it's really been, for a long time, it's been something that I've really been trying to cultivate, because for such a long time I was so heavily in my wounded masculine energy because of the trauma that I had experienced. Like, it just wasn't physically safe for me. It didn't feel that way for me to be able to be in my feminine and be in my body and connected to all of this creativity and spirituality, and, you know, be able to flow and feel. And the more, and I, you know, I've really found that connection with nature, and I do a lot of energy healing through the tree network, bringing that energy down from the heavens into Mother Earth and trying to, you know, raise the vibration of the planet that way. And I used to do a lot of energy healing with horses as well. So, you know, I was super connected into that kind of shamanic, but that it needs to be grounded, you know. And I've always felt you can only reach as high up as you can root down. And but within my own healing journey, like, I was still always kind of struggling to connect with that masculine energy within myself. And for years and years and years, I've been kind of searching for it, and I couldn't find it. And I was always looking for that energy in other people. And it was only recently I had a Godcode session for myself. And within that, I finally connected to my own inner masculine. And from then, the shift that I found in my own like drive, and I felt so much more kind of clear, and I knew what action I needed to take with my business and life, and everything just felt a lot more contained. And I think that mix, it's like the masculine energy kind of, well, in my experience, is just kind of solid and just holds the container for the
Mhm.
feminine energy to be able to move and dance and create and do whatever it needs to, but it's that kind of masculine energy that holds those boundaries and says, you're safe to be whoever you need to be here.
Mhm.
And then the feminine goes, okay, cool, well, I can just love the shit out of you, like and so then it becomes this really beautiful dance, and that expressing that the two polarities of the energies can be so different, but actually their true strength is when they're really combined and working together in harmony.
So is that like the divine union? This idea of having both? Because
Yeah.
like yin and the yang, what I found is like I have found the connection to my feminine and male side in what I do with my work in art. And I found it a long time ago. In terms of like when I first hit the scene doing music, I actually used a female a female version of my voice.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, through the synthesizers, I use like waveforms. I'm a sound designer,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't like my male voice for a long
Mm-hmm.
time. I didn't like it, and I actually used some ideas to pitch my voice to this
Mm-hmm.
feminine version of myself. Then it allowed me to access a bunch of my work that was kind of feminine focused, and then I actually had this feminine voice I could use. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, if you ever notice, there's a lot of music that men do falsetto, like
Mm-hmm.
Smokey Robinson and a lot of rock stars, even like bands like Rush. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of in music where the male voices will pitch up to like a falsetto
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of cuts through sonically when you have
Mm-hmm.
all these really heavy tones. If you have that feminine tone, kind of cuts through.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ends up being this thing where you kind of need this union. You got to have the male energy that's kind of frenetic and structured, but then this female signal is coming through. And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of figured out, well, I kind of need to have all that. So there's this union of both.
Mm-hmm.
And, guys like Prince, you figured that out. Guys like Freddie Mercury figured out. Bowie figured that out.
Yeah.
You'll notice there's like this connection where there's kind of androgyny, or it seems like why are they in touch with both? Well, that's kind of like the sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of it can be difficult to access that, and it takes, again, it's something that takes time, and you have to play with it a bit, and also totally understand that sometimes when you need to be in your masculine, you can be more in your masculine, and when do you know what I mean? It's not about, I think sometimes you kind of give yourself a bit of grace of like,
Yeah.
okay, well, actually, however I need to show up right
Yeah.
now is
Whatever
exactly
serves
how
it.
I need to be.
Whatever serves the moment, you show up as the you, but that you have this kind of yin and yang. You have these both two parts,
Yeah.
and you don't have to suppress it. You like whatever is needed for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And like nowadays, I have songs where I have like male version of my voice or female, or I mix them together. Or it's whatever serves the song. So
Yeah.
sometimes I present with a male character, and sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
present with a female character. Whatever the energy of that song
Mm.
determines what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And that's how you kind of show up in life, is like you realize what you need for that moment,
Yeah.
and you let the moment kind of dictate how you should handle it,
Yeah.
rather than trying to take a formula and force it into the moment that doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was actually exactly, you're saying about finding that character. When I finally connected with my inner masculine, I realized that energy within me was just a really similar frequency to what I had been connecting with externally. So the person that I thought was my masculine counterpart actually just held a really similar resonance to the masculine energy within myself. And that's why I had felt such a big connection with them. So sometimes, if you're not sure, if you're not sure how to connect with the feminine or the masculine within you, like if you look at who you feel really connected to externally, then that can be a really good way to then find, okay, how, like you're saying at the beginning about the mirror, everybody's reflecting back to us what's already within us. So it can be a kind of tool to go, okay, well, let me then connect with that within myself. And then you find you don't need that attachment to that external person because you found that connection within yourself already.
Yeah. I mean, that's the core of a lot of art is to figure out that, like, that looking glass self, or like what we call also the other you.
Mm-hmm.
And artists, we tend to do that because if you notice, like when an artist goes on stage, they almost become this other person. Well, that's like the other you. That's like the looking glass self.
Yeah.
And they're able to present it. And if you actually see them off stage, like they don't seem like that person at all. It's like the person they are on stage, but that is still them. But it's like this other version that they were able to find that allows them to be in that moment.
Yeah.
And the thing is that happens with regular people. How you present at work, how you present to your soulmate or your friends. Sometimes you have these different like masks that you put on, but they're all you, right? And then you figure out like, well, how are you presenting? And it is like whatever that moment dictates is how you present, and it's like this inner self. But maybe you didn't understand why do you present that way. You start as an artist, you start to question as a you if you're a writer, you start to like, well, why do I do that? You start to do that self-analysis and not just go on automatic and like figure out like, oh, I do this. Why do I do that? And then kind of dive into it.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely been, my experience to find that kind of authenticity and find that true self within has, and I think therapy is a great way to kind of start doing that process, because you do start looking at, okay, well, who am I to this person, or why am I showing up differently? Why do I feel like I can't be that true self? And I think for me, one of the kind of major moments was realizing that you are not the person that you are not your mind, you are not your thoughts, like you're not that mask that you appear to be, because that's like your ego, all of that identity stuff, that isn't your true self. And then the kind of spiritual path is kind of going up and connecting with that higher self, higher power, whatever you want to call it, and being able to, for me, it's been about finding that connection and knowing that is actually my true self, and then being able to stay in that person all of the time. And so therefore I always feel like I'm showing up in the world as myself, and that person doesn't change no matter who I'm with,
Yeah, it's like learning how to be comfortable with that. A lot of people end up being, it's like the imposter syndrome is keeping them from being comfortable with who they actually are. And then when people like, well, they self-actualize, was that, if you self-actualize, then you get comfortable with that energy that is like the real you. And then you tend to be functioning like in all cylinders and everything's working, like the law of attraction, things are coming to you, things seem positive. Because you're not hiding within these masks. You're not, that you're actually becoming, and then you become more successful with a lot of things you do and connections and where you want to be in life, because you actually aren't like self-sabotaging your what you got to do, because you accept it. And that's hard. Self-acceptance is probably the hardest thing to start.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely, it's again, it's a process. And I actually had a moment this week when I just felt so much love for not only someone else, but for myself. And it was more about having this feeling. And so often I think when we can have these big emotions, or especially love or anything like that, like it's kind of like, oh, we need to pour it out at somebody else, like I need to point it in their direction. And what I realized was like, actually I can exist in this feeling of love all the time And it's when I feel my best self, it's when I feel the most happy and joyful and connected to who I truly am. And I can also just filter this energy around my body all of the time. And that, and working on doing that is now kind of my focus, and really, and having that frequency of love be my base all of the time. That's my kind of next step in my own personal challenge that I've given myself, is for me to be okay to show up in that kind of openness and that vulnerability, and to trust that I'll be okay in the world, which is so the complete opposite of where I used to be. And I'm also just I just feel so grateful to have not given up on myself, to have got to keep going and got to this point. And I guess it's probably the same with, art or music or whatever it is. Like if you are just starting out, or you are just, if you are struggling like I was when, I was in all of the addiction and stuff, like it can be really hard to not just give up, but to know that, I've always had this thing of like this mantra that's just always been in my head of like, love wins.
Yeah.
And
love is like, even self-love wins is kind of like the start, because like if you have that self-love and it wins, then you're kind of gonna, it's that law of attraction. Like if you're prickly and upset and traumatized, like you show up in the room, everybody can kind of feel that vibe, and you're probably not going to draw a lot of things to you. But if you come into that room where like you looked in the mirror and you love yourself instead of like hating yourself, then people are going to pick up on that. And it's like a vibe. Like you go into a room and you pick up the vibes of the people, and you see the person's kind of prickly and they're kind of like don't want people around. They're pushing people away.
Yeah.
You can feel it.
Yeah.
Like they don't really want you to talk to them, because they're like they're just putting all this negativity. But if you have that looking glass self, that you love yourself, you come in with the smile, you come in with this vibration, people will be drawn to you. And then the opportunities will happen because you're not pushing people away, because you're not pushing yourself away.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think, I was definitely that person for my whole life. I was always just in a no and always pushing people away, because I just didn't know, it never felt safe enough for me to receive for a long time. And if something did come in, then I always felt like I was going to drop it, or I would push it away because I didn't feel worthy of it, or, I didn't have the nervous system capability to be able to hold it, actually. But I think, now, and I'm not saying that I'm 100% there, there's still definitely huge amounts of growth. And I look forward to all of the experiences that I can now feel coming in, now that I am in so much more of a yes than I ever have been. But now, if I walk into a room and if I feel that person, that prickly person that's saying no, now, whereas before I probably would have, seen them in myself and got annoyed or whatever, like now I see people, okay, that person's in a lot of pain. And so actually what that person needs is time and affection and consistency, and someone to just go, do you know what? It doesn't matter how much you push me away. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just going to stand here and love you, because you deserve to be loved, even if you don't think you are.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that's the kind of support and empathy that people need, because so many people, they have these judgments, and we all judge. And then, the first impression, then you make a judgment, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you get beyond that and you get more empathetic, which is kind of like counter to what society kind of puts people into lanes, into areas, as to whether you don't stay away from these people who don't talk to this person unless they're like do the same things, and like, so you try to have some understanding for things that are not in your experience. But
And
a lot of times people try to put you into like boxes where like you got to be only people that have the same experience can be in that box.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
like that's like, counterintuitive to go out and reach the people that are like less familiar to you.
Yeah. I had a thing that coming this week. I was walking my dogs, and I kept hearing "It's lonely at the top," and I was like, okay. And then it got me thinking about God, and I started thinking about, how God must feel, and kind of having this sort of empathy for them, and because I was like, actually, sometimes it must be not great. So many people turn away from them, and actually a lot of people say, oh no, I love God, but is it ever just because they love them because of what they've created or the power that they have, or it's out of servitude, or there's always a reason, or they want something, or they just feel like they should love God. I was like, has anybody ever loved God just for being God, just because they exist, and not because of anything they've done or could do, but just because, like everything else in the universe, it deserves to be loved just for who they are.
Yeah.
And I saw sometimes I see myself with God sometimes, and they took my hand in that moment and they said, thank you, Theo. Nobody's ever thought about me like that before,
That's
and
interesting because, yeah,
and I
because a lot of
felt so
people,
much love.
well, they want to serve God. They want to be like subservient to God.
Mm-hmm.
You hear it a lot of times, like at least in the U.S., is like everybody's like, they feel like they're in a lower social caste than God.
Yeah.
Where instead of like you could think, well, if we're in this universe and we're all connected,
Mm-hmm.
then like there's God within everybody, right? So like
Yeah.
so you love God as another element of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
and you just love it because it's like there's beauty in the universe and it's part of that. So I love it because it's just you know that's
Because it
part of
is.
the world, part of the universe. There's this
Yeah.
universal concept that like a lot of times I've been into this idea of the universal keys. And it
Mm-hmm.
like I'm a sound designer, and like I play with waveforms.
Mm-hmm.
And if, as a musician, I can see the result of my waveform when I go out in front of a crowd. If I create a
Mm-hmm.
waveform sound or a rhythmic, connection or anything to do with music theory, but like how it presents is I get immediate feedback from the audience based on whatever sounds I'm putting out.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, you can say, well, if I put these type of sounds together, I can generate this kind of response.
Yeah.
But these things are universal keys that I'm clicking into
Mm-hmm.
that people are automatically going to respond to because they already exist in the universe, and I'm just tapping into it and I'm channeling something that's out there. And
Yeah.
I'm happen to find it. And I find, there's all these different keys for different moments. If
Yeah.
you connect with them, then you connect with people. And that to me, that's God.
Mm.
It's like universal, like waveform that's out there that connects people. And then that's the vibe you feel when you talk, you come up to somebody. Those are those waveforms, and you feel it whether you can hear it or not. It's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's really how I've discovered what creates such massive shifts in the God coding sessions that I do, because our frequent, again, like you were saying, is everything is a reflection of what's going on inside us. So even if we think we're coming across as super happy and blah blah blah, actually, if our subconscious if our thoughts and beliefs and emotions are not matching what we're showing on the outside, then there's always going to be that disconnect, and you're never going to be able to reach that full, authentic, true self. And you're always going to see, negativity or whatever it is, disconnection in your external world. And when I've been, when I work with clients and when I do God codes healings on myself, the shifts that are created so quickly in your external reality because your internal reality has changed. Your vibe and your frequency, the music that you're putting out into the world is now completely different. It's just it feels miraculous sometimes, you know, how quickly
Yeah.
things can change, you know, just like putting, you know, playing opera one day, one track, and then putting on some like deep house music. Like it literally can be that much of a switch, you know.
But it's like this, you know, we have the ideas like, you know, there's silence between the notes, there's discordance, there's this harmony, there's harmony. And so there's like, if you're like, you know, doing some kind of punk aesthetic, it's very powerful, but it's not harmonious. It's kind of discordance because it's trying to draw attention. And sometimes that's needed. Sometimes you need to draw attention. It's going to be a little discordant.
Yeah.
Like musicians, you play with those moments. But like if you have a mask that's like projecting that it's harmony, but it's really like discordance and distortion is really the source. Well, then that law of attraction is going to come in. Like the true sound that is in you is this discordant kind of, you know, very, 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 you know, jarring. So that's not, and maybe that's needed because you need to draw attention, but like that's not harmonious.
Yeah.
So like sometimes if you get in sync, when you get into like universal tune and everybody's like waving, everybody's
Yeah.
you know, then you actually caught something that's actually showing that yeah, it's actually connected, and the people
Everyone's in
are feeling
alignment.
that love moment, and then you're like, okay, that's real for that time, for that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, those moments of alignment and connection, especially when you have, you know, when you have it in like a crowd, it always feels so powerful because it's like everything is just like you said, like just completely as it perfectly as it should be, and everything is resonating with everything at the right frequency. And you know, people talk a lot about being in alignment, and yet I'm like, if it doesn't, you can feel when you're in that state, you know, you can feel in your body, in your heart, you can see it in your life when things are out of alignment. And I think the more that we can, you know, it takes courage to go, okay, actually this doesn't feel right, and how can I change this, you know, like we were saying at the beginning. But it's worth it. That's the thing. Like those powerful moments that actually you can find in every day. You know, I've sometimes I say that when I talk to friends or whatever, and I'm like, oh well, I had this moment and this moment with God, and then this happened, and I had this download, and you know, they're like, how do you exist like and deal with all this stuff that comes through all the time? But I'm like, but it because I know that in those moments, I would rather have those incredibly powerful, beautiful moments of alignment every single day and know that I can build on that. And actually, the more that I do and I practice being in that alignment state, the easier it feels, and the greater that power becomes, than just kind of sink down and go, oh yeah, well I could, you know, I could maybe connect in like once a year, or, you know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a choice at the end of the day. Like, where do you want to sit? And sometimes it's okay to go, do you know what, actually that's not for me, and I'm going to choose to tap out.
You know, sometimes a lot of times as like an artist, we have a period where we're like we in a quiet, like no connection. Like you just in the peaceful, quiet moment, then you allow that connection moment to happen. So sometimes what I've found is like if I go and kind of get into like not necessarily a meditative state, but it not let the noise of the world distract me and get to a point where I can have some kind of peaceful, kind of calming moment. Like even if I go walk in the woods and there's like a poet, you know, it said that nature's a cathedral, one of the Victorian poets, and just going out in the woods and not having a headphone on and just letting nature kind of restore you. Like people go
Yeah,
out and they go barefoot in nature. It's like that can allow it to come in, like the universe can come in, or the idea of God can come in. But if
definitely.
you're all frenetically connected and all this noise coming in, you won't hear it because there's too many things coming in. Like sometimes you have to have a kind of state, and it
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean meditation, but a way to get to that state of being able to accept it.
yeah, Yeah, definitely. I mean, 100%. I have to do that every day. Like I walk my dogs. I have to be in the woods. I have to go out for an hour and a half, and that's how I start my day. I always come back feeling clearer and more aligned and connected to not only above but also the earth and nature and Mother Earth and Father Sky completely. And if I don't do that, if I go on holiday or if I'm staying at friends or whatever, if I don't have, after like 2 or 3 days, I start to feel not anxious, but just off.
Hmm.
I'm not 100% right because I haven't had that time, and I'm super grateful, to be able to have the flexibility in my life, running my own business and whatever, to be able to create that time. But I think it's important, if you do it, it doesn't, however you want to do it. And I think it can be different again for masculine and feminine energy. I think for me, I never really connected with the sitting still and meditating thing
Hmm.
because I was just, one, my mind was always too busy and it was very hard to kind of create that stillness where actually I think that to come into that stillness can be more of a masculine trait. Whereas actually, I think the feminine, for me, I need to be walking, I need to be moving,
Yeah,
dancing. Like movement is where I find that
I see.
connection much easier.
Yeah, I mean, I find I live in New Hampshire and just walk in the pines. We have these big pine forests
Yeah.
by the river, and you can just go in out there and just feel that cathedral of
Yeah.
nature. And and I also, because I'm a Buddhist, I chant. When I do my chanting sessions, and I'll go and kind of clear my mind through meditation. But I do like be able to go out and walk
Mm.
and and do hiking or just be out in nature.
Yeah.
And being in a place like New Hampshire, it's easy to do that. And
Mm.
yeah, I changed my world around, so I don't. I used to travel a lot. I used to have to
Mm.
do business on planes. I used to have to fly here and fly there, and now I just work remote,
Mm.
and I'm able to kind of do it. And I was able to do the same things I was doing before without being on somebody else's like regimen. I
Yeah.
was able to
Yeah.
say like I am a consultant. I can do this work. I don't have
Mm.
to be like on your in your plan. I do it the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to have confidence to decide that you want to control your life
Yeah.
to an extent where you're not being pushed in directions you really aren't comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I think it's like when you discover, this idea, the divine union you were talking about, the connection between the
Mm.
male and the female, and the yin and yang, and the universe, and what's out and what's in. I think that's where it kind of all starts.
Mm. Yeah. Completely. And that's the thing, everything that the more that I have delved into myself, the more connected to the divine and God that I have felt. And I think, and when we if we see God as this, ultimate, intelligent, unconditionally loving, creative energy, actually, then we realize that we have that within ourselves and that we are the masters of our own universe. And all we need to do is find that alignment and then take the action that feels that to be able to create the life that you want, and not live in that box of other people's stuff. Like you're saying,
Yeah. Well, how you experience God is like a personal relationship, but if your
Yeah.
experience with God is being like subservient and you're actually doing things that you don't feel good about, like if
Mm.
your idea of God makes you feel like you're not even in charge of your life, like you don't have any control, and it's like it's outside of
Yeah.
you, maybe your relationship or experience has kind of been projected by other people.
Hmm.
Because if you're not feeling good, then something's like disconnect. So it's
Mm.
like that assessment to like maybe your experience is not really as connected as you think, and maybe
Mm.
you should challenge your conception. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's hard because it's hard to go against something that you were brought up with, and maybe it was external, and you were told that that's the way. But
Yeah.
once you start to be like, well, how do you want to experience God so that you
Mm.
feel good about life? So you feel like you can make movements forward, that you feel like that you can be part of the world.
Yeah.
I
And I
think that
think,
there's nothing wrong with thinking about that and challenging it.
no, definitely. And I think, and I definitely had an experience recently where I was asked, by God to let go of something that I was, one of the most important things to me in my entire life. And I could never imagine ever finding anything better than that. But I knew that I had to let go of it and just see what happens. And when I did, something greater than I could have ever imagined in my entire life came forward, and that's the thing. We have to kind of believe that, or I believe that God wants our life to be easy, and he wants it to be not easy. There's still going to be challenging and growth, but he doesn't want it to be uncomfortable. Like, he wants you to be living your best life in
Yeah.
love and happiness and connection, in whatever you want to find that in. And we just sometimes have to that's where faith comes in, is that, if you can jump, know that you'll be caught. But you got to kind of, you work out that you're jumping in the right direction.
Yeah.
And
But
and
it's a level of there's a level of discomfort in moving to the next phase because it's not something you know,
yeah.
and people want to know. Like, so if it's unknown, that unknown thing can be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But the unknown thing is how when you live your life, it's like it's not gonna be perfect, and you're gonna keep on working on it till you're not here. So
Yeah.
some people want it to be done. It's
Yeah.
like, well, it's never gonna be done.
Mm.
Right. And it's like every day there's something to get up and learn. And like if you think you're done learning and done experiencing, it's like, well, that's the wrong mindset, because it's you're always gonna have to continue until you're not in this plane. And
Mm-hmm.
then you'll probably be on another plane continuing at a different plane.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so the idea that like you can have some set thing where you can want it, you can try to plan for it, but it's like that jazz thing. Like, how do
Mm.
you deal with the perceived bad note when it's like really not a bad note? It's like you're thinking it's a bad note. It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's where how you can respond to life's opportunities is, instead of saying it's like, oh, they're mistakes,
Mm.
they're opportunities.
And also, just because we think something's a bad note, actually someone might listen to it and think that it's the most beautiful note ever,
Yeah.
and that,
That's why it's an opportunity.
we've just got to let things happen, and let everybody, including yourself, love and enjoy however you're going to show up in the world, just as you are, and how it's meant to be.
Well, this has been a great conversation. It always goes faster than
Yeah.
I ever thought. We already hit the hour, and it just goes by. I want to let people know that they check out your website again, www.seerhealerguide.co.uk. That again is fully clickable.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch live, but we will be on all the major podcast platforms later today. And you'll be able to check that out on whatever platform you like to listen to or watch podcasts. But I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Fam Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been so great connecting, and it's been a really wonderful conversation. So I'm really grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, have a great day.
You too.